YouTube, what is good? It's your man Ribs from Doing Film Things. The day is finally here, y'all. I finally released my DIY home darkroom printing guide, specifically for color printing. Basically, I've put together this beautiful PDF that includes a ton of text and of course some sample video footage as well. And it has all of the information you need in order to not only build a darkroom at home in a very DIY way, but also it instructs you on how to actually make a print from beginning to end. And of course, there's some troubleshooting built in there as well. That way you can help yourself figure out what is wrong with your prints. So I'm really excited about this, and I finally have it available to download. It is a paid product and it costs $20 US. So if you're willing to go ahead and support me and you're looking to start your own darkroom as well, I highly recommend you go ahead and check it out. More information and the download link is in the description box below. All right, so for this video, I want to show you what I think are the 5 most essential pieces of gear that you need to start your own color darkroom at home. Let's go ahead and jump into the darkroom. All right, so the first essential piece of equipment for the darkroom is of course this right here. You need an enlarger. You can't really do it without it. There are some crazy hacks I've seen on the internet that are more fun projects where you can basically build your own enlarger, but that's not what this is about. So of course, to print, you need an enlarger, and this one right here is pretty beefy. This is probably way more than what you need to get started, but the beauty of this enlarger is that it can do multiple formats. So you can do 35mm and then a couple of the different medium format options. When I first started darkroom printing though, I was using my Miopta enlarger, which I just sold, and that one is only for 35mm. And that's great because a 35mm only enlarger actually costs a lot less money than something like this. I bought my Miopta, I think, for just under £100 UK. This right here retails, well, on eBay sells for, let's say, at least £250, although I think I got a pretty good deal because I paid less than that. But nonetheless, the point is, get yourself an enlarger that you can handle in terms of price. If you shoot a lot of 35mm, then probably only get one that holds 35mm. If you shoot a lot of both, or if you really shoot a lot of medium format, then you might want to spend a bit more and get one of the bigger enlargers. But nonetheless, as long as it works and it supplies your particular format, it doesn't really matter what enlarger you get. They each are different, but they each have their own kind of quirks, but they all basically work the same. All right, so the next thing you need for your darkroom that's essential, of course, is this. This right here is a processing drum. Basically, the whole way this works is that this kind of works just like a drum you would use to process film. It's completely light tight, but right here, there's a bit of an opening where you can pour your chemicals in. And once they go in, they're actually trapped in a little reservoir and they won't go down into the contents of the tube until you tilt it. Once you tilt it, the chemicals flow and start to move about here. Then of course, as you roll your tank, then you're exposing the surface area of your paper to the actual chemicals. This is amazing because basically you don't need any trays and you don't need any fancy machinery. And with color printing, everyone kind of assumes you need trays or machinery. Trays are difficult because you need full darkness, and to move around and put paper in and all that stuff in the dark, that's very difficult. And then of course a machine requires a machine, which means electricity, money, perhaps something breaking, there's a whole bunch of stuff you might have to deal with there. With this, you don't need any of that. This is purely just a tank. And as long as it's light tight and as long as it has this little valve, that's it. These things are very kind of easy, they don't really require much fuss. Finding one of these can be a bit challenging. This is the Jobo brand right here, and this one fits paper as big as 12 by 16. This one I think I paid maybe £50 for on eBay a while ago. So definitely go online and try to find one of these. If you can't find one, there are other brands as well, and I'll put some of the brand information down below. But there are a variety of tanks, and they all kind of work exactly the same. They're light tight, and they have an opening for your chemicals. And then of course, you do have to rotate this somehow. You can use your hands, honestly, like this, like what I'm literally doing right now, and that works completely perfectly. I've had 0 issues doing that, and that's the only method I use now. But you can buy an electronic roller where you place this on it and it rolls it on its own. You can buy a rolling base, which still requires a manual effort, but it gives you extremely even processing rolling. So, there's a bunch of options, but seriously, if you just use your hands and go like this, dance with it, do whatever you want. It doesn't have to be perfect at all. I guarantee you it will work just fine. So the next thing you need for printing that's very essential is one of these. And I know this looks like just a hunk of cardboard with tape, but this is basically a homemade easel. And an easel is necessary because that is how you get proper lines on your print, and that's how you hold your paper down as well. Your sheet of printing paper has to be completely flat, that way it's perfectly in focus. Additionally, if you want to crop to a certain size, you need something to create some hard borders around your print. This is homemade, and I show this because you can do this on your own. Instead of honestly using one of these like I did with just cardboard, you can go to a framer shop and have them cut some mat board for you. That'll be significantly more precise and much cleaner as well, with really, really nice hard edges. This doesn't have super hard edges because I cut it with a box cutter, so it's not very precise. Of course, you can also have a real one like this. So this right here is an 8x10 easel, and it opens up, you put your sheet there, it's got some grooves to hold the paper. The point is, this will give you the absolute best result. So once you really figure out what you're doing, I highly recommend you upgrade to something like this. This one is fixed, so you always get this same size image, but easels do come with what look like rulers where you can kind of move them around and create whatever image size you want on whatever paper you want as well. But each size paper will basically require a different easel usually. Although I think there are some that might be interchangeable, but nonetheless, you'll have to figure that part out. But an easel is definitely necessary, whether it's a real one like this or a homemade cutout one, because otherwise your prints aren't going to align properly. And if you print just directly onto the paper, even if you tape your paper down or make it flat somehow, you're going to get some hard edges coming from the enlarger itself. The enlarger, although it has a specific cutout for the size of the film, straight light comes through and then you get these like weird little blotches around the edges of the print. So it might not look great. It looks cool sometimes, but generally, depends on what you're looking for. But either way, do a homemade easel or do one of these. It'll definitely make a difference in your prints. All right, so of course you need some of these when you're printing. Here we've got some RA4 Chemicals. I won't tell you the specific brand, because I'm not sponsored by any of them, but the point is you need basically two specific chemicals. You've got what I've got here, which is developer, and then what you've got here is the Blix. The developer actually develops the image, the emulsion that's on the paper. And then the Blix, just like when you're doing film, basically, fixes the color, and then it also wipes off all of the remaining emulsion and gives you that finalized print. These two things right here, there's a lot of debate online as to whether they're reusable or not, but ultimately there's kind of two ways you can proceed. With the developer specifically, because that's the one that really kind of exhausts faster. The way I print, I do shots. Basically, I take 100 mil of this, or maybe two fluid ounces, pour that into a little beaker, and for every single run of print that I do in the tank, I'll get a brand new shot in there. So as much paper that I can fit in the tank, whether I do a little test strip, or whether I do a giant 12x16 sheet that fits the entire inside of there, that will print regardless. So that volume will print whatever you put in there in terms of just, kind of 100 mil per print cycle. Although sometimes I put a little more just to make sure that I get the best even development that I can, because if I don't agitate perfectly, then, I might not develop a massive sheet of paper if that's what I put in there. The Blix definitely is highly reusable. Basically, I'll put out like 150 mil of this in a beaker and just reuse it over and over and over again throughout an entire print session. I don't even heat this up that much, honestly. I kind of just leave it open to the air and it just works. And I don't know the chemistry, and some people might say that I'm wrong or that my prints are coming out poorly because of it. I have no idea, but the point is, in my experience, this works. The other way you can use developer is to actually, pour out a shot, like I said, into your tank development, and then pour that shot back into the full container. And basically, you're going to be mixing it up over and over and over again. Eventually, the aggregate amount of developer will probably exhaust. I don't know if that's going to give you more or less use than what I get, but potentially maybe more. I have to try that, but I just haven't done it because I got really used to my process where I just use as little bit as possible and dump it after each run. So, you can kind of figure out what works for you, but I definitely encourage you to try it. But yeah, these are the two chemicals you need. There is no stabilizer like you do for black and white, for example. Apparently, and from my research, the paper that you use to print already has built-in stabilizer in it. So all you need to do at the end of printing is rinse your print very thoroughly, clean the water up a couple times, and then just let it dry, and it's all good. I haven't noticed any of my prints degrade over time, and I've only been printing for about a year. So, we'll see what happens in the long run. But as far as I can see, no stabilizers needed. There's a whole bunch of different brands making chemicals, so I urge you to kind of go figure out which one works for you. But they shouldn't be that expensive. They're definitely cheaper than C41 chemicals, for example. I don't know how much black and white chemicals are because I don't use them that often, but this shouldn't cost you too much. Additionally, like I said, you can get a lot of use out of the Blix. We're using it over and over and over again, whereas this exhausts a bit faster. So you can actually just buy developer too if you want, instead of buying a full kit that has both. And both of these typically come as concentrates, so you just mix them with water according to the certain proportions. Usually it's 1 part chemical to 4 parts water, and then you're good to go. And then of course you got to keep these at temperature. So I just put them in a bucket with super hot water, and that's it. I don't kind of run a sous vide or, you know, change the water out or anything like that. You can, of course, if you want. You want to be extremely precise, but I find that as long as this is somewhere around 35 Celsius, whatever that is in Fahrenheit, 95 or something, I don't know, it's going to print fine. That temperature is good, and a bucket of water, of hot water sitting in the tub there, that'll keep it fairly warm the entire time. I don't think I've ever had issues with developer that's not hot enough to develop. And color cast wise, I haven't noticed anything obvious. The casts that I deal with typically come from the Enlarger, and of course that's based on your settings. So the whole print journey is to figure out what settings are best for your print. But yeah, experiment with these, try all the different brands. I've tried them all. I'll tell you what my favorite is if you DM me on Instagram. But they all, honestly, they all work. I haven't noticed one to be better than the other. It's just a matter of price for me. And there's one specific brand now that sells only developer if I want that. And that's amazing because I find myself needing way more developer than I do Blix. Last but not least, of course, you need paper. This is obviously photosensitized paper, so it has an emulsion on it, and it has to be kept in complete darkness, which is why it's in a box. And inside the box, there's a black bag, a black plastic bag as well that doesn't allow any light. So you really have to keep this safe because it will accidentally expose very, very easily, and then you'll have these horrible blotches of really dark color on your prints. Anyways, this is 8 by 10, and this is what I recommend you all start with because you get 100 sheets in a box, and the price is, I don't know, let's say between 35 and 50 bucks, depending on where you buy it. And that's US dollars, so, you know, figure out the conversion for you. Nonetheless, 100 sheets is great, especially when you're starting out because you're going to use a lot of paper trying to figure out how your Enlarger works and just how to do your own process for printing and kind of the muscle memory. So you want a lot of sheets. Additionally, printing something of this size doesn't require super long exposure times. If you get paper that's bigger than this, you're gonna have to move your Enlarger up in order to fit the area. And in moving the Enlarger, that means much longer exposure times as well, which can become annoying, especially if you don't have a timer. So I just highly recommend everybody start with this. For all those reasons. It's just easier, you get more paper in here, and wasting an 8 by 10 sheet of paper hurts a lot less than wasting a 12 by 16 sheet of paper. I do print 12 by 16 occasionally as well, but I do all of my test prints on paper this size. I even rip it into test strips because I want to try to use as little paper as I can. After figuring it out on a sheet like this, then I put in my big 12 by 16 to print. Otherwise, I'd be spending and wasting a whole lot of money on paper. And also like resources, you know, film photography, it's not good when it comes to the environment because, you know, we use a ton of plastic. You know, this paper has plastic in it, the film is made out of plastic, and then we throw a lot of this stuff out. You don't throw your negatives out, of course, but this paper, you know, all your test strips, those end up in the garbage or as scrap paper, but ultimately they're not the final product. So try to minimize as little as paper as you can, and basically, you know, start with smaller so you really figure out what you're doing, and then move up to the bigger print sizes. So I hope this video was helpful. If you enjoyed this video, please go ahead and leave a like down below. And of course, if you want to talk to me, if you got any thoughts in your mind, please feel free to share them in the comment box below as well. That's all I got for today, y'all. Peace.